Hi there. This is split off from my main review analysis video of House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 6, Small Folk. That what I normally do is I make a list of the top 7 most notable things in an episode. This was point 7. I'm splitting it off for more focus. That Rhaenyra and Mysaria kissing scene at the end. That it overshadowed too much discussion about the rest of the entire episode. So I'm splitting it off to give it more focus. I'm posting this first out of order because I don't want the comments section for the main video about the episode as a whole to be dominated by this. That it's all they were talking about in the post-episode interviews, even though a lot else happened in it. So this is purely for talking about this, try to focus the discussion in both videos. And I know I'm recording this Saturday afternoon, but I had to take all week to think about it and see what other reviewers were saying first, because it was very negatively received initially, and my instant knee-jerk reaction to it, watching the episode cold, was very negative. But then, as they explained more about their rationales behind it in interviews, and there were other developments this week over a couple of days, on a meta level of the reaction to it, that every time I had to revise what I was going to say, as you will see, there were attempts to review bomb the episode over this, which is awful, simply for having same-sex content in it, and the back and forth of what's going on with this and other possibilities with it. So let me cover this. I want to keep it focused to have more impact. That's why this is a standalone video. First off, I and pretty much all other reviews I've seen felt that this kiss scene jarringly came out of nowhere with hardly any setup. That those are the keywords you keep hearing. Not enough setup and jarring. Sudden. These are words everyone's describing it with. And, the instant reaction watching it is we feared that we're so used to being burned by Benioff and Weiss and wondering what the heck are the writers doing, and conversely, there are accusations at the other end of the spectrum. At one end, there's people going, oh, they're pigs doing this. At the other end, you have, oh, it's the writers trying to go woke or something, which doesn't seem accurate either, as I will explain later in the video. But then in the first, this is why I stopped even trying to make same-night reaction videos, because they usually say things in the interviews that genuinely made sense whenever they had something that was a little off, or things that I realized they made sense by the next video this season. These people are not Benioff and Weiss, and they deserve the benefit of the doubt. We are reasonable people. Most normal writers, you can figure out what they're doing. But in the first set of post-episode interviews, they revealed that, oh no, this wasn't the writer's idea, this was actually Emma Darcy's idea. And it's not even, oh, it's an ad-lib by the actor. I wouldn't even call it an ad-lib, because they said Emma was pushing for this for months. That apparently, as originally scripted, it was just this intimate moment of mutual understanding or something, which morphed into, later revisions turned it into a hug, and then Emma insisted on, my character, as I understand the character, would actually start kissing Mysaria in this situation for solace. Now, obviously, there's a whole debate back and forth about giving the actors leeway to interpret a character versus how the writers are trying to keep the fictional construct of a character coherent. And it's a dialogue between the writers and the actor and the cooks in the kitchen, I get that. But that alleviated a lot of my concerns, really. As it did for many other reviewers, that, the writers they cover every single character. They might not give a lot of thought to them. Generally, we sympathize with when a actor says, I feel such and such was out of character, or because I'm the one person devoted to realizing my job is to be Cersei or Robb Stark, versus the writers have to cover everyone's. They inherently can't put as much focus on one of them. So if Emma Darcy insisted on this, even though I'm not really sure myself if it was fitting for the situation, that Emma insisted artistically, I felt this is when a character would start kissing, it made me feel a lot better. So and the other reviewers as well. So a general consensus I've seen, I pretty much agree with all the other major analysis channels, is our conclusion is this was a bit flawed. It needed more setup scenes for what you were trying to do because it ended up being a little fast and jarring. But flawed isn't bad. Bad in the sense of it doesn't break the show or anything. It doesn't even break the episode. It's just it landed a little flat. And by other reviewers, I mean, this is why I took days to look what everyone else was saying, to have a measured response. I'm going to link these, a couple of nice 10 to 15 minute reviews by Red Team Review, a nice one by D. Charles, Supercuts Delight, and also World of Westeros. Really good quotes from D. Charles and Supercuts Delight in there of what exactly is the controversy, and if this was a little slow, the past two episodes, slow is better than fast. And just, well, what exactly changed? The quote they all give is, flawed but not terrible. Why are you... It's not great, but I see what you were trying to do on paper. This, in turn, and others have said this as well, this has led to me and these other reviewers have mentioned this, starting to speculate more broadly across episodes 5 and 6 about the potential impact of the Writers Guild of America strike last year on this season. That the problem is the first two episodes were so mind-blowingly good, we forgot about that going into the season we were a little worried. And realistically, they'd probably address it as a triage situation, where with limited time, for they did come back for reshoots later. But inherently, coming back for reshoots months later is different from the ability to do rewrites and reshoots as you are actively filming. They probably focused most of their reshoot mental focus on the first two episodes, who wouldn't, and then probably on the last ones as well. The premiere and finale always get priority. Mid-season episodes are always bottom of the totem pole, last on the list, so that might be what made 5 and 6 rough around the edges in like 2 or 3 scenes, not even that many, that weren't even bad by my standards, but just, we all said this, you could tell they needed a little fine-tuning here and there, for pacing, or for the smoothing in, that, oh, suddenly they're going to start kissing. Well, you need to make it a little more obvious there's attraction there. And let me tell you right now, if the, literally 2 or 3 a little rough scenes in episodes 5 and 6 that we've had are the worst effect that we've had from a once-in-a-decade, once-in-20 years writer's strike, we have dodged one hell of a bullet. If this was the worst of it, that the running theory is episodes 7 and 8 will have a lot more attention focused on them because they're the finale. That if this is the worst of it, I'm relieved. That, there were other things, the only other things were, Rhaenyra disguised as a septa thing actually grew on me. Not that it's great, but I could see how this makes sense on paper. It flowed into episode 4. Well, episode 4, there was payoff to it. They're showing we were setting up a story arc for Rhaenyra that, alright, I tried everything I could to achieve peace. It failed. Even my last face-to-face meeting, now let there be war. That, okay, I see where they were going with that. Retroactively, once you see episode 4, it makes it better, or maybe episode 5, my one complaint was Daemon's Harrenhal arc, specifically in that one episode, was a little slow. In terms of pacing, not in terms of content. Relative to every other episode, I loved Harrenhal. So that was just, it needed a pacing tune-up. And in this episode, it was the Rhaenyra kissing Mysaria thing needed a scene more leading up to it. If these were our only problems, we should count ourselves lucky. Except, of course, the Vale storyline with Rhaena, and was Nettles cut or not. We'll judge that after episode 8. I can only comment on that after the finale. I'll leave it at that. But that's judging it based on something from the books that I don't think a TV-only viewer would notice. So if these were only, there's 1 or 2 or 3 rough scenes, fine, impact of the writer's strike. Again, as the other analysis channels have already pointed out, the source material is just an outline, Fire and Blood, and particularly this section of Fire and Blood, Team Black does very little. I mean, specifically Rhaenyra and Daemon do very little. And to an extent Daemon, that between Blood and Cheese and when they start finding Targaryen bastards to ride dragons, the sowing of the dragon seeds, Rhaenyra does very little. So from episodes 3 through 6, which are the ones between those two things, I wouldn't expect Rhaenyra to have a lot to do. They need to try to expand on what she's doing. So I recognize there was limited source material, particularly for Rhaenyra here. And these tended to be the roughest scenes and Daemon, like I said, they had to expand on it. We're reasonable, we understand you had limited source material, and you probably made this during a point where you weren't allowed to, because of the strike, do on-the-fly rewrites and reshoots for everything. You could do a few months later, and this may have slightly affected the quality, but I'm okay with that. I think the next few episodes will win back the crowd, both because they had more focus and because Rhaenyra's plot really kicks off with the dragon seeds that we see starting in this very episode. My other complaint was Corlys hasn't had a lot to do, and we're going to have dragon seeds, some of which are Corlys's bastard sons. There's going to be a ton for Rhaenyra to do. And really, thinking on this, it's directly comparable to the invention also in Season 2 that Alicent is having sex with Criston Cole. In both cases, it's that they're these lonely characters seeking solace through physical intimacy. It's just that Criston had a bit more setup, and that Criston at least was shown to be enamored with Alicent as Rhaenyra's rival by the end of Season 1. And on top of that, we knew ahead of time that there were deleted scenes from Season 1 where they can point to and say there were a few scenes trimmed here and there that showed that Criston was really enamored with Alicent, and the actors have cited that as well, that we wanted to work it in a little more. So, generally, I think Alicole managed to work in the TV show, that they show it's not a real relationship, and it falls out anyway by episode 6, that they were lonely. I'm not really complaining about it now. But by direct comparison, that leaves us with the question, maybe there were deleted scenes that were supposed to set up Mysaria kissing Rhaenyra more, which, after Emma insisted on we're going to do this, they did write, possibly even film, but then got trimmed for time because these are really long episodes. So, or maybe not even scripted, maybe they just intended for them, but there were time constraints, which that's why you don't, ad-lib. That's why if you invent one thing, you're inventing an entire subplot. Because this isn't something that can be in just one scene. You need more setup scenes for it. And you have to judge, even if this is a good idea on paper, do I have the time to have the building blocks around it, the setup scenes to smooth it in? So, again, I have seen social media posts by queer women who claim they could tell that actually, through their performances at least, the earlier Mysaria Rhaenyra scenes in Season 2, the actors were trying to set it up as best they could, that it's a mutual attraction. It's just that it was a little subtle. That they cited that Rhaenyra is flustered and at a loss for words around Mysaria at certain points. The problem is I think it was a little too subtle. That it needed to be more, if this many people are having this reaction, it needed to be a little more obvious. Though I respect the actors were doing what they could, and they said in the interview they were trying to set it up. Problem is also apparently attraction between women can be very subtle in real life, and they were trying to be realistic. Just, a little flustered or something, not like held gazes and things, would be hitting us over the head. It kind of reminds me of, to use an example from animation, Avatar: The Legend of Korra. Starting in Season 3, they started dropping subtle hints that Korra and Asami were two female characters who were attracted to each other. Korra-Asami, as the shippers called it. But it was subtle things, like, and it's a cartoon, so it's not even like, we're reading meaning into it. It's an animation, anything you do is intentional, that there was subtly different body language, that they'd have a lingering gaze, or a hand kept on a shoulder a bit too long, that with animation you go, oh no, that was very intentional, which I did not pick up on any of these hints at the time, because I am not a gay woman. I'm not LGBT, so I feel bad when some people say, "Oh, how are you judging whether this is accurate or not?" And you're not in a position to say that, and you're right, I'm not. So, retroactively for the cartoon, you could point to, oh, these were things, or the writers were trying to set that up for Korosami. For this, there's enough people saying, well, we thought the actors were trying to subtly hint at an attraction. Should have been more obvious. I know what they're trying to do. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the shippers who just read into everything. There's shippers who read into Kragan and Jace, you know? So sometimes it's meant to be a mutual attraction. I mean, like, Elephant in the Room is reminiscent that the Rhaenyra and Alicent fans, but that's because the actors actually said we sort of played it as such an intense friendship that it could be the equivalent of a romantic thing in terms of intensity. If the creator admits I kept it ambiguous, it could be seen that way, maybe. But otherwise, you're just reading your own meaning into something. So it's a slippery slope. It's ambiguous. I get all of that. So comparable to Alicent and Kristen Cole. Why am I that upset? It's just you needed a bit more setup, and maybe there was setup that got deleted. So I've talked about all of this, that it was a little subtle. Apparently, woman-to-woman attraction is more subtle. So ultimately, it was a little jarring, but like I said, I was really angry at the time, but it was Emma's idea that, okay, I see what you were trying to do on paper, but it doesn't, like, ruin the season or anything. And people were all, like, what the other reviewers are saying, this is all overblown, what exactly is the problem here? Separate section now, and this is why I kept pushing this video back, and I have to rewrite it every time. Couple of days after the episode came out, as the fan-submitted review stars on IMDb came out, we noticed that it was getting review bombed on Internet Movie Database, where if you sign up for an account, I mean, I don't have one, but you can submit a star rating for episodes of 1 to 10 stars, and people noticed this episode got lower than Season 8 episodes. Like it was 6.4 or something. Now, obviously, I was not expecting this to be as high as a Dragon Battle episode, but I thought it would be at least rated better than Episode 5, and I liked Episode 5. It was decent, it was a follow-up episode to a huge battle, it was pausing for breath, but I remembered that people were excited about Episode 6. They were excited that the pacing was better, faster. It felt like it was going somewhere. It was written by Eileen Shim, who wrote Episode 8 last year, which was very popular, the Velaryon trial episode. So this was all playing out in real time, you understand, that at first we thought, oh, it's being review bombed by the usual internet trolls for having LGBT content. Then, not me, but others figured this out, and when I'm saying just over the Twitterverse, this was happening in real time. Others figured out that the episode was being review bombed specifically by religiously conservative Muslim countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. Like Federica Baccio from WinterIsComing.net figured this out, and thankfully it's been circling around real news sites now, like Screen Rant and Culture Crave. I've noticed reporting on this, so it's not just a fan thing, so I'll link to their articles, don't take my word for it. It actually bubbled up to real news sites, but you see, it turns out IMDb has, the reviews can be filtered by geographical region. So in this quick chart, you can see the percentage breakdown of what number of ratings were there from 1 to 10 from the top 5 countries. Like just the United States or just Britain. So like if you click on just the United States, you'll get a graph showing 15% of the reviews were 10 out of 10, 10% of the reviews were 1 out of 10. It'll give you a breakdown, but only of the top 5 countries. And for both the US and the UK, in their individual breakdowns, something like 15% of the ratings were 1 out of 10, because there's always it skews towards, in any episode, there's a few more 1s than there are 2s, that either people think this is a 10 or a 1, so it skews towards the extremes a little. In any case, but still like 15%, USA and Britain thought it was 1 out of 10. If you filter for Saudi Arabia, in contrast, 60% of their reviews were 1 out of 10. Keeping in mind that gay marriage is illegal in Saudi Arabia, conservative country. And that's not to say we're not seeing backlash from other religiously conservative countries about LGBT stuff on TV. I do not want this to be just a Muslim thing, that IMDb only lists the top 5 countries. So for all we know, religiously Catholic Christian countries, very staunchly Catholic countries like Brazil or Mexico or France or something, may have given it very negative reviews. It's bizarre, it's just that for whatever reason, Saudi Arabia has a very big presence on IMDb. It's just a very popular website there. And I checked, we were wondering about this, is it just that a bunch of people from Saudi Arabia came in to review bomb this episode? No, like going back to season 1, seemingly innocuous episodes, like the premiere or something, Saudi Arabia's been one of the top 5 countries. Which I've had whole other videos on this about the breakdown of the international fandom by country. Like, loosely the top global countries for House of the Dragon in terms of online presence are the USA, Brazil, UK, Germany, France, India. Then maybe below that Canada and Australia, maybe Spain, but Saudi Arabia is nowhere in the top 20 or anything. But it's disproportionately represented on IMDb. And I've checked for other shows as well. For whatever reason, it's just a popular website in that country. Just luck of the draw. And it has this disproportionate footprint as a result. This all reminds me of, tell me in the comments, a few years ago, remember that Cartoon Network sci-fi show Steven Universe? Season 4 had a gay wedding in it. Then season 5 felt kind of truncated, as if there was supposed to be a 6th season. Then creator Rebecca Sugar admitted there actually was supposed to be a 6th season. They got cut short due to extreme backlash over the gay wedding in a children's cartoon. Not backlash from the United States, reviewers there, but specifically, she said, backlash from international markets that deeply oppose LGBT content. So in the past few days, we were all just shocked by this review bombing, regardless of origin. I mean, Star Wars The Acolyte, they're saying it was also review bombed for having LGBT characters, though that wasn't skewed geographically, but guys, review bombing is always a distraction, and never works. The criticisms about The Acolyte were due to flawed writing and structural things, not the mere presence of LGBT characters on general principle. That distracts from the real criticisms. I mean, people didn't review Star Wars Andor, even though it had a prominent same-sex couple in it. It was the first Star Wars project to have a prominent same-sex couple. People weren't review bombing it over that. It's a matter of the quality of the writing overall. This is a distraction. It's not even helping your own complaints about other stuff they're doing with things. Never works. So, review bombing over such bigotry, it makes you look foolish. A lot of review channels, when we saw this, were horrified. I mean, we were criticizing the Rhaenyra Mysaria kiss as, this is a bit sudden and needed a little, like another setup scene or something. Not criticizing for LGBT content in general principle. I mean, even Westeros.org, they didn't know about this when they made their video review, and then I personally pointed out in the forum to Elio and everyone that I said, oh, it turns out we can tell from geographic filters it was being review bombed in conservative Muslim countries. They were horrified by that. And this is a forum conversation I had. They said, oh, we were rolling our eyes at it, but because we felt it needed a little more setup, and they acknowledged in the video thing, oh, it turns out it was ad-lib by the actor, it kind of feels like that. But review bombing because of anti-LGBT stuff in principle, that was awful. So we're all kind of united on that. And I think ultimately this tempered our response, that it is irrelevant to all of us that this was a same-sex kiss. Let me make that absolutely clear. And the comparison is to, again, it's kind of like Alicent having an invented sex relationship with Kristen, which had a little more setup, but at the time we felt was jarring, but that you could tell there were deleted scenes. Irrelevant that this is a same-sex kiss. Because Rhaenyra is pretty much implied to be bisexual in the book. Most Valyrians are. That Valyria was as tolerant of that as the Royn are. There's a big line in the book where it says, Rhaenyra grew fond and more than fond of her cousin Laena Velaryon, which pretty much indicates that she was bi. So it's not about, if this was like, oh, now Sansa is kissing someone or something, when the book never implied that character was bi at all. This is a character who we pretty much considered canon bi. So the criticism isn't, oh, and suddenly they're doing same-sex stuff out of character. You know, it was in character, it's just we felt it was jarringly sudden, as it would be with anyone. Again, writer's strike, rough around the edges, need a little more setup, doesn't ruin anything. And this disgusting bigotry, I mean, another thing it reminds me of is that South Park episode about how, more recent South Park episode about how China is now such a big market for our entertainment that Disney feels pressured to remove LGBT content from Marvel movies. And because China discriminates against homosexuality on screen. And we're not going to kowtow to Chinese communist censors about putting LGBT stuff in or not. Nuanced reaction, though, I will stress one major criticism which still stands for me, and which arguably is my point here, which stands for now, which I'm hoping they fix. This was not a triumph of on-screen representation. Instead, it was so sudden, it felt kind of sensationalized. Even if that wasn't their intent, it became sensationalized due to the meta-level reaction by casual news sites, which they have no control over, but they should realize would do that. That this scene was the only thing post-episode interviews asked about. None of the other relationship things with Rhaenyra and other characters like her sons or political stuff, it's all they focused on. And not just the male gaze shippers either. I'm so used to fighting against, oh, the Benioff and Weiss are pigs, they're throwing in girl-girl content. It's a little jarring for me that now we have pro-LGBT, like queer women shippers who are really pushing Rhaenysant. It's weird that I just, instinctively, I'm used to this being guys pushing for, the horn dog stuff that Benioff was always shoving in, that it's unusual for me that this is the women shippers who want to read into Rhaenyra Alicent is also a little jarring. So there were some people who were trying to really push for, oh, this is so amazing that she's bi, and said, well, she is bi in the book, and they didn't mention it before, but this isn't even a criticism of the TV show, but how the infotainment sites have just turned into clickbait. And that it's all they talked about, and the people fixating on it, that what was upsetting to me, why am I upset about this, is that this is a one-time kissing scene. Probably not treated as a long-term relationship. And even if next episode they're having a one-night stand, the way, if we see them in bed, the way Alicent and Kristen were, this is not a book canon long-term relationship. They're not going to play it as a years-long dedicated thing, the way that Renly and Loras were, or other characters from the books. The book canon long-term same-sex relationship of this prequel era is between Jane Arryn and her dear companion, Jess Redfort. That's the term they use, quote-unquote, my dear companion. And Jess Redfort hasn't been introduced at all, and they haven't even mentioned in her 2 scenes that Jane Arryn is a queer woman. And Jane Arryn isn't just experimenting, she is the main LGBT character of this era, long-term relationship, and compared to, well, Laenor was mentioned as having long-term relationships, but they tended to get killed off after 2 episodes. Well, that first Joffrey Lonmouth got killed off pretty much the episode he was fully introduced, and then with Carl Corey, 2 episodes in, they wrote them out of the show. The great thing about Jane Arryn and Jess Redford is nothing bad happens to them, and they live through the whole war. That they're just up in the Eyrie, they're not getting hurt, and they're this long-term relationship. And maybe I'm being critical, because maybe Jess Redford will appear within the next 2 episodes. I don't think she's in episode 7, so maybe episode 8 we have 1 or 2 casting rumors, that's it. But I'm not sure. And what do you... I'm sorry I'm struggling for words here. I don't want to offend anyone if you genuinely felt this was representation, but please tell me in the comments. I want to have a conversation about this, that we're supposed to be cheering that Rhaenyra had a kissing scene as this is representation, while at the same time they haven't shown any of the long-term canon couple, which hasn't been represented. And there has been, like, I was talking with Federica Baccio over Twitter about this publicly, that we were annoyed that, well, they cut out that Rhaenyra liked Laena, and they haven't really set up Jane Arryn yet, so is this exactly what you'd call good representation? And then again, another possibility that struck me, given that this was Emma Darcy's idea and really pushed for this, maybe Emma Darcy is the one who pushed for it specifically out of annoyance that they weren't devoting enough time to Jane Arryn, or out of annoyance that they didn't do enough with Laena, and Laena died, so admittedly there's only so much they could do structurally, but that they didn't mention in dialogue, oh yeah, I used to be really close with Laena. Maybe this was Emma's way of pushing in diversity, specifically because she was they were annoyed that Rhaenyra wasn't with someone else, or Jane Arryn. I'm not sure. So I don't know if they, and I'm hoping it's just that Jess Redford shows up in the finale, or failing that, season 3, but I have mixed feelings on this, because this wasn't really a triumph of representation. If it's something the actor Emma they had to come up with that the writers hadn't come up with, that we shouldn't be putting, if it was Emma's idea, why are we praising the writers for representation? That doesn't make sense. I don't know. So is House of the Dragon erasing its gay characters? On top of the Laenor stuff, that another thing entirely separate is Sabitha Frey. Then in the book, Sabitha Frey, the wife of the lady who's the wife of Lord Frey, she is rumored to be in a relationship with Black Aly Blackwood. Black Aly Blackwood has not appeared yet, though they did mention Benjicott exists, her nephew. And Sabitha Frey went from being this teenager who wears men's armor into battle to, I think they called her Serena Frey, and she's this middle-aged woman when Jace is treating with them. So we remarked at the time in episode 5, like, this was a younger queer woman, that clearly they're not setting up that this older woman will be with Black Aly, or be a warrior on the campaign with her, and we have yet to really set up that Jane Arryn is this gay character in a long-term relationship with her dear companion. So I feel like they've really dropped the ball on that, and maybe this was Emma pushed for it because they didn't have any other content. There are 2 episodes left, but consider season 1 had LGBT representation by the 5th episode of season 1, and this did not really do that, except for this basically ad-lib by the actors. So I don't want to be angry at this, because the season isn't over. Who knows what they're doing with Jane Arryn the next 2 episodes? And, like, a bigger thing, broader issue of I was annoyed that they didn't use enough of Cragen Stark. But then we found out rumors and leaks that it's not that they cut all of the backstory stuff with him that Jace does in the North, and the backstory he fought his uncle who was a usurper, but we get the impression they're moving that to Season 3 to space it out more, which is fine. We heard rumors that Kragan will actually come south with the Winter Wolves by the finale. So maybe similarly, they wanted to space out the Jane Aaron content more, not that, because she isn't a priority in Season 2, I understand that, but maybe that was their plan, just establish she exists this season, and that, similar to Kragan Stark, they were going to give more of her backstory in Season 3. Particularly because I think Seasons 2 and 3 were conceptually one unit split across 2 seasons, so that might have just been the plan. And okay, there are structural reasons you might need to do that, and I will forgive as soon as we get it. That if we pushed back Kragan giving his backstory, we pushed back his sister Sarah Snow. If we get that in a finale or setting up that it's coming in Season 3, I'm fine. I'm a Song of Ice and Fire book fan. I can wait, so long as we know it's coming. So, my biggest annoyance about this Rhaenyra Mysaria thing wasn't that they did it, but that I'm annoyed on a wider level that they have not really done enough to set up Jane Aaron and Jess Redfort yet, who are the main LGBT representation of this prequel era. Nothing bad happens to them, that they're alive. They're up there in their romantic castle above the clouds in the Eyrie. So, we'll see what's going on with that, but I was initially very upset about this watching the episode cold, felt a lot better watching the interviews, realized, okay, it's more like Alicent and Cole, it just doesn't land as well. Maybe the writer's strike affected this and they needed more setup scenes. And then I was horrified that it was getting review bombed by religiously conservative countries. What was deeply upsetting and tempered the response. So generally I'm agreeing with all these other review channels of our thoughts on this of, it doesn't ruin the season, but it's not a high point, and me personally, I think I'm the only one saying this, when are you going to start actually setting up Jane Aaron? That she's been underused, but the season isn't over yet, we're on the cusp of episode 7 and 8, I know Jane wouldn't be a focus in episode 7, but would we at least see Jess Redfort in episode 8? I don't know what's going on with that in terms of representation and stuff, so I desperately hope I have given a balanced response to this, because the message is actually, I am cautiously optimistic, that I'm not as upset about this as I used to be, and I'm cautiously optimistic about Jane Aaron, but this is stuff they need to address. So, moving ahead, though, I think 7 and 8 will have more writer focus, and with the sowing of the dragon seeds, the story will finally pick up for the Rhaenyra thread. So, please like and subscribe and follow through on this. I'm going to follow through on judging 7 and 8, where is the story going with this, because the story isn't over yet.